A lifetime of military discipline taught me to navigate treacherous waters, but nothing prepared me for betrayal from my own family. They saw an aging mother, easily managed, a comfortable retirement fund, theirs for the taking. But they overlooked one critical detail. I wasn't just a mother. I was Captain Teresa Hale, retired Navy, and my life's most important mission was about to begin, reclaiming my ship. The first sign that my life was no longer my own was a sterile, red-lettered message on a checkout screen. Payment declined. I was trying to order a special, high-nitrogen fertilizer for my Admiral Nimitz climbing roses. At 66, my garden was my sanctuary, a small patch of order and beauty I'd cultivated since retiring from the Navy. The purchase was a mere $47. The debit card was linked to my main account, an account that received both my captain's pension and the survivor benefits from my late husband, Mark. It should have been more than healthy. A small, cold knot tightened in my stomach. I tried the transaction again. Declined. My fingers, stiff with a touch of arthritis, fumbled to dial my daughter's number. Chloe, the accountant, the one who sent me neatly organized, jargon-filled spreadsheets each month, was the primary manager of my finances. The call went straight to voicemail. "Hi, sweetie, it's Mom. The card isn't working. Call me back when you can." Hanging up, I stared out at the meticulously pruned rose bushes. 2 years ago, in the raw, disorienting aftermath of Mark's funeral, Chloe and my son, Liam, had sat me down in this very living room. They had presented a united front of loving concern. "Let us take this burden off your shoulders, Mom," Liam had said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "We can make your assets work for you, help them grow," Chloe had added, tapping a folder of projections. In the fog of grief, I had agreed. It felt like a relief, a delegation of duty. I signed the papers that made them joint users on all my accounts. Now, that small, illogical discrepancy, a $47 failure, felt like a flare in the night. In my years of service, I'd learned that anomalies are never truly small. They're just the visible tip of a much larger, submerged problem. My home, nestled in a quiet community for naval families in Washington state, was a testament to a life of discipline and modest comfort. The brass gleamed, the floors were spotless, and every book on the shelf was aligned with military precision. This external order was a shield against the creeping chaos I felt in my financial life, a domain where I had become a guest. Liam, who styled himself a venture catalyst, would call twice a week, his voice a tidal wave of infectious but vague optimism. He'd paint vivid pictures of his latest project, a boutique hotel conversion in a soon-to-be gentrified part of Seattle. "It's a guaranteed win, Mom. We're getting in on the ground floor," he'd say. I would listen, remembering his past guaranteed wins, the failed craft brewery, the wellness app that never launched. A part of me, the captain who once managed multi-million-dollar budgets for naval equipment, knew the smell of high-risk ventures. But another part, the mother, chose to hear only his passion, his ambition. I let myself believe I was funding a dream, not a pattern of failure. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, handled the day-to-day. She managed all the online banking passwords and held the primary cards, a setup she insisted was for security and efficiency. Once a month, a crisp financial summary would arrive in my inbox. It was a masterpiece of corporate obfuscation, looking more like a quarterly report for a Fortune 500 company than a statement for a retiree's nest egg. It was filled with terms like portfolio diversification and capital allocation, but short on the one thing I wanted: a simple, clear number for my balance. When I once expressed a desire to donate $5,000 to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, a cause Mark and I had supported for decades, Chloe had gently steered me down. "Mom, that's a wonderful thought, but the bulk of your capital is tied up in a crucial investment cycle right now," she'd explained patiently, as if to a child. "Pulling a large sum would disrupt the projected returns. How about we do 500 for now? We can revisit a larger donation next quarter." I had agreed, just as I had agreed when she'd vetoed my wish to upgrade my cable package to include a History Channel that aired naval documentaries, calling it an unnecessary recurring expense. Each concession was a small thing, a minor erosion of my autonomy. I told myself I didn't want to be difficult. They were busy, successful people, and I, a retiree whose most complex daily calculation was the fertilizer-to-water ratio for my hydrangeas. Each time a flicker of doubt arose, I would extinguish it with the same rationalization. They love me. They are doing this to help me. The water was getting warmer, but I, the frog, was mistaking the seductive warmth of being cared for genuine safety. The breaking point arrived not with a bang, but with a whisper. It was a Sunday afternoon, gray and drizzly in that classic Washington way. I was on a video call with my sister, Eleanor, who lived in the sun-drenched predictability of Florida. We talked for an hour, the conversation a comfortable tapestry of garden woes, neighborhood gossip, and shared memories of Mark. When we finished, I tapped the red end call button on my tablet and set its screen down on the sofa cushion beside me, thinking the connection was closed. A few minutes later, the tablet chimed. It was an incoming video call from Liam, with Chloe joining a second later. Perhaps it was a system glitch, a lag in the software, but the call connected automatically. The screen remained black, as it was face down, but the microphone was live. I was in the kitchen, filling a watering can, and at first, the sound of their voices was just background noise. Then Liam's words cut through the air, sharp and clear. I'm telling you, Chloe, the contractor is threatening to walk. I need another $60,000 by Wednesday, or the whole hotel project goes under. There was a weary, irritated sigh from my daughter. Liam, are you serious? I just moved $40,000 from her main account last month. Where do you think this money is coming from? From the same place it always comes from, he shot back, his tone stripped of all the warmth he used for me. The bank of Mom. Just do it. We need to move fast, while she still thinks we're doing her a favor with all this financial management crap. A cold dread, heavier and more profound than any grief I had ever known, began to seep into my bones. I stood frozen, my hand gripping the watering can. Then came the final, fatal blow. It was Liam's laugh, a short, sharp, ugly sound. Don't worry so much. She can't even remember her own online banking password. We asterisk her bank. Seriously, without us, her Navy pension would just be sitting there, rotting away. We're putting it to good use. The watering can slipped from my fingers, clattering into the sink with a deafening clang. But they didn't hear it. They were too busy dividing the spoils of my life. In that moment, the carefully constructed illusion of their love and concern didn't just crack, it vaporized. I saw them not as my children, but as predators who had been circling me for 2 years, patiently, methodically, waiting for the right moment to feed. The warmth of the water I'd been floating in was revealed for what it was, a prelude to being boiled alive. In the aftermath of that conversation, there was no storm of tears, no frantic, accusatory phone call. The grief was a cold, hard stone in my chest, but something else was happening. The shock was crystallizing, hardening into a diamond-sharp resolve. It felt like a dormant part of my brain, a circuit that had been powered down for years, was suddenly humming back to life. The soft, accommodating persona of Mom receded, and in its place stood Captain Teresa Hale, the part of me that had managed shipboard crises, that had made life-or-death decisions in the unforgiving environment of the open sea, was now fully awake. Emotional confrontation was a losing strategy. It would only alert the enemy and give them time to fortify their positions. This was not a family dispute. This was an operation. That evening, I bypassed the recent contacts on my phone. I went to a small, leather-bound address book I hadn't opened in years, a relic from my service days, filled with the names of people bound by shared oaths and experiences. My finger traced down the alphabetically ordered names until it found him. David Chen, retired JAG Corps commander. David wasn't just a brilliant legal mind. He was a man of unshakable integrity, a warrior who wielded the law like a weapon. We had served together on the same carrier strike group. I had seen him dismantle a fraudulent contractor's entire case with nothing but a well-phrased deposition. He understood rules of engagement. He understood betrayal. When he answered, his voice was, as I remembered, calm, steady, and perceptive. I didn't pour out a torrent of hurt feelings. I delivered a situation report. "David, it's Teresa Hale," I began, my voice even and my facts precise. I have a situation requiring legal counsel. It involves a hostile takeover of personal assets. There was a short pause. Teresa, it's good to hear your voice, but you sound on duty. I said. I outlined the initial agreement, the gradual loss of control, the declined debit card, and the conversation I had just overheard. I stated the facts as I knew them, concluding with, I believe my assets are being systematically misappropriated by my children under the guise of financial management. The silence on the other end was heavy with controlled anger. Teresa, my God, he finally said, the professional calm momentarily breaking. Mark would be spinning in his grave. This is a classic textbook case of elder financial abuse. Then I heard the click, the mental shift from friend to commander. All right, Captain, here's what we're going to do. His voice was the most comforting sound I had heard in 2 years, because it was devoid of false emotion and full of practical, decisive strategy. First, we go on the offensive, but silently. We need to quantify the damage. Second, we cut off their access completely and legally. We will establish an irrevocable trust. This is non-negotiable, Teresa. A revocable one they could challenge, try to pressure you into changing. An irrevocable trust is a legal firewall. Once the assets are in, they can't touch them. Ever. You will be the sole beneficiary. I will serve as a co-trustee alongside a corporate trustee to ensure ironclad, impartial oversight. All of your assets, the house, the stocks, the pension deposits, every last cent will be transferred into this trust. It will be your fortress. For the first time since I'd heard my children's voices, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. It was the familiar, bracing feeling of a sound strategy. The mission parameters were clear. The objective was defined. I was no longer a victim waiting for the next blow. I was a captain, and I was about to retake my ship. The following 2 weeks were an exercise in dual realities. On the surface, I was the same placid, slightly out-of-touch mother they believed me to be. When Liam called, his voice booming with fabricated optimism about the hotel projects, spectacular progress, and imminent groundbreaking, I would make the appropriate noises of maternal pride. Oh, that's wonderful, dear, I'd say, my voice steady, while I stared at the wilting azalea in my garden that I now knew had been neglected because I couldn't buy its proper food. When Chloe sent a condescendingly cheerful text, just a heads up, Mom, market's a bit volatile, but your portfolio is holding strong thanks to our strategy, I would reply with a simple, thank you for taking care of everything, honey. I played my part with a discipline honed over 30 years of naval service, a performance of benign ignorance that would have earned me an Oscar. Beneath this placid surface, however, Operation Independence was proceeding at flank speed. David, true to his word, had mobilized his resources with military efficiency. He connected me with a forensic accountant named Sarah, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with piercing eyes and a mind like a steel trap. She seemed to relish the hunt. My only contribution to the evidence gathering was a shoebox of old paper bank statements I had insisted on keeping, a habit Chloe had called old-fashioned and a waste of space. To Sarah, that shoebox was a treasure map. From those statements, she was able to get the account numbers, and with a limited power of attorney I signed in her office, she bypassed Chloe entirely and requested a full, detailed transaction history directly from the bank's fraud department. The report Sarah produced a week later was a cold, numerical chronicle of my children's betrayal. It was more brutal than any verbal confession could ever be. She laid it out for me in her office, a grim ledger of greed. $352,481. That was the precise amount siphoned away. The transfers were disguised with an accountant's cunning, dozens of smaller payments, all just under the $10,000 reporting threshold, made to a shell corporation named L&C Holdings LLC. Sarah had traced its registration in less than an hour. It belonged to Liam, with Chloe listed as the treasurer. My retirement nest egg, Mark's legacy, had been treated as their personal slush fund, propping up Liam's fantasies and funding Chloe's complicity. Armed with this irrefutable proof, I met David and a trust lawyer at a discreet office downtown. The documents were laid out on a polished mahogany table. As I signed my name over and over, my signature firm and clear, I felt no hesitation. With each stroke of the pen, I was transferring my home, my investment portfolio, and the direct deposit of my pension and survivor benefits into the Theresa Hale Independence Trust. It felt like decommissioning a compromised vessel and christening a new one. The entire process was executed with the quiet precision of a special forces operation, leaving no trace for the enemy to detect until the trap was sprung. The bank accounts they had access to were now empty shells, and the pension that was due to deposit next week would be rerouted to a new, fortified location they didn't even know existed. The hammer fell on a Tuesday. I was in my garden, finally applying the expensive fertilizer to my roses when my phone began to ring. It was Liam. I ignored it. A minute later, it rang again. Ignored. Then came a text message, a string of frantic typos. "Mom, call me now, something is wrong with the accounts." A cold, clean satisfaction washed over me. The first missile had hit its target. 20 minutes later, their car screeched to a halt in my driveway. Liam and Chloe stormed up the walkway, their faces a mask of panic and fury. I didn't get up from the comfortable armchair where I was reading. I simply watched them burst through the door, a courtesy they had long since abandoned. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Liam demanded, his voice cracking. "I tried to make a transfer for the hotel's payroll and it said account not found. The bank won't tell me anything." Chloe, ever the more composed one, stood with her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of disbelief and accusation. "There seems to have been a massive error. All the accounts are showing a zero balance. Did you do something?" I placed my bookmark carefully in my novel and looked up at them, my gaze steady. For 2 years, I had been the one who was managed, who was placated, who was dismissed. Now the chain of command had been restored. "There was no error," I said, my voice calm and devoid of the anger they expected. "Your access has been revoked. All of my assets have been moved into a new legal structure." They stared at me, their minds struggling to process the information. The idea that their docile, compliant mother could orchestrate such a maneuver was clearly beyond their comprehension. "What are you talking about? A new legal structure?" Chloe stammered. "You can't do that without consulting us." "On the contrary," I replied. "I can, and I have. It's called the Theresa Hale Independence Trust. I am the sole beneficiary. You are not listed." The panic in their eyes curdled into a desperate, ugly rage. The masks fell away completely. "How could you, Mom?" Liam shouted. "After everything we've done for you. We were trying to build a future for this family. For us, you were helping us." Chloe chimed in, her voice rising. "You'd rather trust some lawyers than your own children." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I reached for the file folder on the end table beside me and slid it across the coffee table toward them. It was a copy of Sarah's forensic report. "This," I said, "is what you have done for me." As their eyes scanned the first page, the color drained from their faces. The blustering and moral outrage evaporated, replaced by the sickening silence of the truly guilty. At that precise moment, as if choreographed by David himself, Chloe's phone rang. She answered it, her hand trembling. Her face went from white to ashen. "What? What do you mean frozen?" she whispered into the phone. "My accounts, why?" I already knew the answer. David was on the other end of that line. He was officially informing them that, based on the evidence of financial fraud and elder abuse, a court order had been granted to place a temporary freeze on their personal primary bank accounts, pending a full investigation. Their Bank of Mom was not only closed, it was now the source of a legal siege against them. Their world had just collapsed, and they finally understood that I was the one who had pushed the plunger. 6 months later, the drizzly gray of Washington was a distant memory. I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment in San Diego, a property purchased outright by the trust. The Pacific Ocean stretched out before me, a vast expanse of blue, its surface glittering under the relentless California sun. The air smelled of salt and bougainvillea. The legal storm had been messy but swift. Faced with the mountain of evidence Sarah had compiled, Liam and Chloe had, on the advice of their own panicked lawyers, agreed to a settlement. They avoided criminal charges by signing a legally binding document that relinquished any and all future claims to my estate and acknowledged their financial misconduct. Their frozen accounts were released, but not before the full amount they had taken from me, plus legal fees, was clawed back and returned to my trust. Their boutique hotel dream was dead, and their financial futures were in ruins. I'd received one final letter, forwarded by David. It was a pathetic, rambling plea, a cocktail of feigned remorse, blame, and a desperate request for a small loan to help them get back on their feet. I read it without emotion, my morning coffee in hand. Then, I walked inside and fed the pages into the new shredder I'd bought myself. The whirring sound was deeply satisfying. My life was mine again, in a way it hadn't been for years. I spent my mornings walking along the coast, my afternoons volunteering at the local VA center, and my evenings building intricate, beautiful models of the naval ships I had known and loved. I had reconnected with old service friends who lived in the area. We didn't talk about our children. We talked about tides and winds and the shared, unspoken understanding of a life lived by a code. The old family order, built on a foundation of my silent sacrifice and their casual entitlement, was gone. It had not been reformed, it had been demolished. In its place was a new order, one of solitude, peace, and absolute sovereignty. I was no longer an asset on a spreadsheet, a resource to be managed. I was the captain of my own ship, sailing under a clear sky, finally and completely free.